and many thanks for joining us on this edition of the program, People, Politics and Power. We do apologize for bringing the program to you a few minutes behind schedule. I am Imoni Amarere. The Nigerian Senate will resume its plenary sessions on Tuesday after a 2-month annual recess. The 10th Senate had proceeded on the break on August 7th, shortly after it unveiled the names of the chairman and vice chairman of its standing committees. Before then, the Senate had screened and confirmed 45 ministerial nominees sent by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, while rejecting 3 of the nominees. The upper chamber of the National Assembly sat until late in the night on some days to clear the nominees before embarking on the recess. Although, like all other law-making bodies across the world, legislative business never shuts down completely. Even during breaks, plenary sessions are usually put on hold. For instance, during the recess, the leadership of the 2 chambers of the National Assembly went on a retreat in Uyo, the Akwa Ibom State capital, to brainstorm over how they intend to deliver on their legislative mandate. When the Senate resumes on Tuesday, it will be coming face to face with the many challenges confronting the Nigerian state, some of which it left behind 2 months ago before going on break. It is expected that it will inaugurate its standing committees that should, as they say, hit the ground running in the discharge of their constitutional duties. One of the first tasks that the Senate will also be expected to carry out will be the screening and confirmation of some persons appointed by the President in acting capacities while the legislature was on break. These include the Central Bank Governor and the 4 deputies and 2 additional ministerial nominees for the Ministry of Youth Affairs. Now, by some coincidence, the legislature is resuming at a time when the Nigeria Labour Congress (NLC) is threatening to embark on an indefinite strike over government's fuel subsidy removal and the seeming delay in the rollout of palliatives for workers. This will definitely be a nut for the leadership of the Senate to help in cracking in a constructive manner as to avoid the attendant disruptions to Nigeria's fragile economy. One other key issue that the Assembly will be engaged with is the 2024 budget proposal. We are already in the last quarter of the year 2023, when the executive usually submits its budget estimates for the next year for vetting, consideration, and passage by the legislature. It will be the first such budget estimate by the Tinubu administration for the 10th Assembly to consider. It is expected to test the competence, the expertise, and the will of the lawmakers to do right by Nigerians in the midst of huge national challenges. There are also the issues raised in the conduct of the 2023 general elections and the cause for another look at some aspects of the Electoral Act 2022. And then, of course, the usual ritual of constitutional amendment process, which every one of the assemblies has dabbled into with minimal success. From 1999 until now, there has always been a constitutional review process by the National Assembly. The Senate is expected to settle down very quickly to discharge its constitutional functions, even in the face of some murmurings during the recess of the planting of the proverbial banana peels under the chairs of the leadership. We shall engage with all of these on the program today. But very quickly, let's bring you up to speed on some of the developments that have taken place today. First, let's go to Nigeria's Supreme Court, where we understand that the court building was in the early hours of Monday gutted by fire. Parts of the building, that is. The fire outbreak, which was promptly put out, however, raised the offices of at least one justice of the Supreme Court. And some vital documents were also reported destroyed in the inferno. According to the Director of Press and Information, Festus Akonde, the fire emanated from an electric surge but was contained before it spread to other offices in the building. There were no casualties as the staff of the court and firefighters were on hand to contain the situation. Litigants and lawyers were seen in the court premises going about their businesses like nothing happened. The fire outbreak is coming just 1 week after the Apex Court resumed activities for the 2023-2024 legal year. And from Abuja, let's quickly take you to Zamfara State. And the good news coming from that state is that 16 abducted persons from the Federal University, Gusau in Zamfara State, have regained their freedom from the bandits who forcefully took them away last Friday from Sabon Gida community of Bungudu local government area of the state. The management of the Federal University Gusau confirmed the release via its official X, formerly known as Twitter handle. The university gave a breakdown as 13 students and 3 laborers. 18 individuals gained their freedom following the swift efforts of the military. An unspecified number of female students of the Federal University Gusau were abducted in the early hours of Friday, that's last Friday, from their hostels in the Gusau area. That's the hostels where the students stay in Gusau. They were abducted in the early hours of that Friday from their hostels at the Sabungida community in Bugudu, LGA of the state. Rescue of these 16 persons, 13 students and 3 laborers, is coming hours after President Bola Ahmed Tinubu directed security agencies to ensure the release of the abducted or the rescue of the abducted students and workers. All right, so let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll be going straight into our discussion. The resumption of the Nigerian Senate, which comes up on Tuesday after a 2-month break, and what Nigerians should be expecting.
Nigeria of our dream, the Nigeria we need, is the united, indissoluble, and cohesive Nigeria, which guarantees equity, fairness, justice, and prosperity for its citizens. That is our focus on people, politics, and power. It is fresh, insightful, impactful. It's a must-watch. People, politics, and power on AIT.
All right, thank you so much for staying with us. I'm joined in the studio at this point in time by Honorable Cletus Oban, who is a former lawmaker in Nigeria and a scholar. Honorable Cletus Oban, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Honorable Oban, thank you once again for finding time to join us.
Thanks for having me here
The
today.
National Assembly resumes in a few hours from now.
Yeah.
The Senate particularly will be our focus. What is it that we expect, given the very many issues that have been on ground in Nigeria, at least in the last 2 months since the Senate went on break?
Well, the Parliament is the mouthpiece and representative of the people and their wishes. And they therefore carry with them the ideals, the vision, the burden, and the happiness or sadness of the community they represent, which is in this case their constituents. Therefore, it is not unexpected that so much is going to be, the entire community, the entire country, the entire world is going to be focused on what the representative of the people will be. The Senate in particular carries more of the burden because most of what you know is going to happen will be, what will happen to the Nigerian people will come from that chamber. And therefore, it is important that we focus on what they are going to do. And like you rightly noted in your intro, you are going to have a situation where the Senate is coming with its hands full, and it left with its hands full, dazed as a matter of fact. And this is what I thought should happen to the Nigerian people, that when you have a Senate that has demonstrated so much interest in the common good, for example, in shelving and its constitutional right, its own rules, to sit even on non-sitting days, even on public holidays like Saturdays, to ensure that the screening of the ministers took place. And now, of course, don't forget that even within that period, there was supposed to be a strike. The medical NMA was poised for a strike. The Senate President had to intervene and all that. The labor organization, the same thing. And of course, remember that also in the last Senate, there was also the intervention at the level of the NLC through the then Speaker, who is now Chief of Staff. So the National Assembly acts in a way that it soft lands most of the actions that ordinarily should shake the executive. Now, as we speak, the security situation, thanks to the Senate President, thanks to the senators, and thanks also to the executive arm through the President, who acted promptly within 72 hours after the abduction on Friday, the security situation, and of course, don't forget that it was during this period also that we had the killings of security personnel in Imo State, and therefore, it does appear that there is a pattern that has been established in which after the coming of a new regime, each cycle of elections, there is a surge in the security situation in the country. So it's as if the bandits and the terrorists and the insurgents constantly look for an opportunity to register their presence each time there is a new government. The Senate has to look at all this. Of course, that requires a lot of synergy, which is what makes the intergovernmental relations between the three arms of government, the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature, to, at this time, be called to be on the alert more than ever before in the history of our country, which is that, one, we are facing another level of threat. First, with the removal of oil subsidy, there is the traditional economic hardship that will be occasioned by that fact. The second is the issue of insecurity, and the third is now the issue of the other social and governance issues that ought to take place ordinarily, like the budget you mentioned. They have to now get into the budget. The executive have to present the budget, and we have gone into the January to December budget cycle, which means they are going to be under pressure between now and December, this last quarter, to ensure that the budget is passed and then returned for signature of the president. So the Senate is going to be under intense pressure within this period, and there's no hold back. And they are coming back tomorrow, which is 26th. By Wednesday next week, you are going to have a public holiday, and then you have the 1st October public holiday. So they are going to be under intense pressure to act and to intervene in a lot of issues.
Well, what exactly do you mean when you say that the Senate has a greater responsibility? There are two arms of the National Assembly, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Yes. Don't they share in equal measure their responsibility to the people of Nigeria and to their constituents?
I made allusion to the intervention of the last speaker, who is now Chief of Staff, of his intervention, which under the ASU strike, which is still pending. There are other issues as well, I will tell you. Why I say the Senate is simple. Don't forget that there are issues in which only the Senate has to take decisions. And of course, the President of the Senate is the Chairman of the National Assembly. The Chairman of the Senate and the President of the Senate is the Chairman of the National Assembly, which means that both chambers, the Constitution refers to them as two houses. The two houses have to get into concurrence on a lot of issues. Constitutional amendments, the budget itself, and all that. Oversight functions are as equally shared. But don't forget that in screening, for example, of ministers, the House of Reps is not involved. But that does not mean that they cannot question, because it is under the legislative jurisdiction of the House of Reps, like the Senate, to question any matter to which they appropriate funds and to which they have oversight functions. They have quasi-judicial to summon anybody who function within that legislative jurisdiction. That is to say, as long as you live within the space called Nigeria, and any law made in Nigeria is binding on you, the two houses of the National Assembly can question you. But when it comes to issues like screening and other things, there are specifics in which the Senate has to take responsibility. And given that the Senate President is the chairman of the two chambers of the National Assembly, this retreat, which just took place, is to synchronize and cause a synergy consciously put in place for the two chambers to be able to get the result that Nigerian wants. No Nigerian wants to hear that the National Assembly is divided over any issue, because what Nigerians want to see is the result of whatever decisions and whatever laws they are making and whatever oversight functions. For example, the duplication of functions, the kind of budgets that we are seeing. For instance, I expect that that retreat should be able to come out with resolutions in a manner that you don't come and put 20 roads in the 6 geopolitical zones at the rate of 4455 passes and end up with no road, because the budget does not the release of budget releases, execution of budgets can never be 100%. They should stop that level of just putting budgets and putting projects just for the sake of it, to go to their constituents for the purpose of winning the next election and saying, you know, this road, we have put it. When the road is not, for instance, you cannot, nobody in the south and southwest and southeast will say that the east-west road is not important to them. Same also, you cannot say that the Abuja-Kaduna-Kano road is not important to people in the northwest and north central. Same also, you cannot say that the Enugu-Makurdi-Jos Bauchi road is not important to any Nigerian, because the south-south, the southeast, the north-central are going to be involved. Those roads should be picked out and 100% funding assured for them, so that in a cycle of 4 years, we should be able to say, this has been executed or this is where we stopped on a particular project, rather than have 5 roads that none is executed because of poor funding.
So is the retreat meant to synergize on some of these issues? Or what exactly, because there are a number of senators and even House members who are new in the National Assembly, who actually needed this retreat to know the procedures and processes that take place in the legislative arm of government.
Yes, no, there are 75 new senators out of 109. 75, more than 70% of the number in that National Assembly. But most of them are experienced enough because they have either been in the House of Reps or they've been in the Houses of Assembly. And coming from that background, it is easy for them to get involved. I know some speakers or former speakers of the House of Assembly are there. But while you are teaching them that, while you are introducing them to parliamentary procedures, there's also synergy issues about the National Assembly. It has become remember under the 8th Senate, there was a major crisis between the two houses, in which even within parties, there were broken tones, in which there was no agreement on any issue. For instance, you discover that under the Saraki presidency, I must call names because it is important for us to locate this within our history and interpret it in a manner that we don't go through the same route and expect that we are going to get a different result. Because the purpose of a parliament is not to confront the executive, but to cooperate with the executive to give maximum result and value for voting to the voters, to the people. That is the whole essence. It is the oversight function is for corrective purposes, not for damaging purposes, because a parliamentarian is not a critic. A parliamentarian is a government official intended to ensure that what is meant for the people goes there, and therefore you caution, you punish as much as you direct the purpose of government and ensure that constitutional rights and constitutional benefits that accrue to the people gets to them. Now, in doing this, the retreat in Ikotekpene in Akwa Ibom State that just ended some 48 hours ago is not just to get the people acquainted with parliamentary procedures, but also to ensure and look for a framework, a platform, a network in which both houses synergize and work in a manner that will bring purposeful governance, both at the executive and the judicial level. And in doing that, I expect to see from tomorrow a kind of synergy where there will be no duplication, for example, of oversight functions, in which the Senate goes to find a different thing on a subject matter, and then you have the House of Reps going to look at the same thing and bring a different result because the interests are not coinciding, because there is no convergence of interest. There must be one interest. That interest is the Nigerian people and how the parliament best serves them and how they carry their voice and their fears and their worries and their total happiness, which is enshrined in Section 14, which insists that the primary purpose of government is the security and welfare of the people. And that, once it is deviated upon, all parties and their manifestos capture that in their manifesto when they promise the kind of things they want to do. It is for the security and for the welfare of the citizenry. Anything short of that is a deviation.
Even with that provision in the Constitution, which you say all the parties subscribe to, we have seen in the past parties, and this is normal, disagree on issues of principle and of ideology in the Senate or in the House of Representatives. Now, this time around, we do have a lot more parties in the Senate than in the past. At least we have representation from a number of parties than when it was just mainly the APC, the PDP, Accord Party, or what have you. At least there are about 6 or 7 parties represented in the Senate, this in the 10th Assembly. What are your expectations as far as party interests are concerned?
Yeah, the party interest will not be as primitive as to condemn a policy simply to score a political point. There are 8 new parties. There are presently 8 parties in the National Assembly, unlike before where you used to have 2 or 3, dominated by APC, PDP. Today, Labour, Accord Party, all kinds of parties are there, YPP, they are all there now, 8 of them.
NNPP and
they are all there. So now, against the background of that, this kinds of retreat is the leadership of the National Assembly, not leadership of the Senate or House of Reps. What that means, and this is for the first time in our history, that you are going to get all former presiding officers of the National Assembly presenting papers based on their experiences. Patricia Ite was there, Ken Namani, Senate President before, the chair of most of the sessions, Pius Anyim, who became SGF after heading the National Assembly. So a wealth of experience was brought to bear, and I partook in it to the extent that we were allowed into the venue, and I discovered a lot of experience coming to bear and the exposure of that experience, and that these people are from different parties, and that APC presides over the National Assembly today, but had the courage and the moral rectitude to bring in people who have divergent ideological opinions, to come and bring it to bear on the leadership of the 2 houses. It was quite revealing for me. It was quite timeous, and I must commend the Senate President and his leadership and the 2 houses of the 2 Abbas and the Senator Godswill Akpabio for thinking it out to bring out that kind of retreat in which you have former people who have this kind of personal experiences to bear on the young people and the new people coming into the National Assembly. And this is where, again, we must talk about institutional memory, the preservation of institutional memory. That does not mean that a redundant senator or House of Reps member should be brought back to the National Assembly for the sake of retaining institutional memory. Functional, effective representation should be rewarded by a return to the National Assembly. But like I said, it does not include the fact that redundant members who sometimes out of 180 days don't go there for up to 80 days. Those are not the kind of representation we're talking about. To get institutional memory is to say those people who have to be returned have to be effective and seem to have functioned and represented their people well, because beyond representation, there is also the issue of legislation. And beyond legislation, there is also the issues of governance. So those 3 functions of the legislature must be brought to bear in the quality of people that you have. So as far as I'm concerned, this retreat and the next parliament, the next sittings that you're going to see, I expect to see a very robust National Assembly rather than see this diversity as a crisis. The diversity is going to bring union. Because I remember as a parliamentarian where it was even members of the governor's party, members of the president's party that became his biggest problem. Look at the Obasanjo 3rd term. It was the PDP members that even came out. So it is not enough to say we come here. Even in the most advanced of democracies, the United States, where we took our democracy from in a different variant, you find a situation in which even a Republican will come out and say, against my wish and my personal principles, I am voting on this matter from this end. People voting against their party on principle on certain issues, abortion issues, taxation issues. In the UK, you have the Tory, the Labour Party, and the Conservatives. You find them voting as core purposes when it conflicts with personal interest against the party. and they vote with others, and they speak out against it. So you are going to have this robust engagement in the present assembly in spite of the diversity. Rather than become an issue, rather than become a challenge, it will rather become a fertilizer, a democratic fertilizer for this moment. So I see this National Assembly coming out as one of the best that you can ever have, given the issue that they are now interacting with the past as a way of getting the present right and keeping a future going.
Talking about robustness, how robust can the National Assembly really get in engaging with national issues? Against the backdrop of the fact that the immediate past Senate, that is the 9th Senate, was described by so many people as a rubber stamp Senate. Not just the Senate, but in fact the entire National Assembly was seen as a rubber stamp to the executive. Now, how robust can this Senate be in its engagement with issues as to be able to perform its role of a check and balance on the executive arm of government? What should it or must it do?
I will illustrate this with the first actions it took within the first 1 month, which was the issue of Niger. There was a presentation made by the president to the National Assembly. What was the response of the National Assembly? Now, when you even say the last 9th Assembly was rubber stamp, it is because, like I stated in my opening, that the parliament is not a co-wife, housewife, that is permanently uneasy with the other co-housemate or co-wife. It is rather an elixier, a motivator, a moderator of the executive and the judiciary, making laws for the judiciary to interpret and correcting and oversighting the executive council, the executive arm of government to do what is right for the people. Now, when you say a rubber stamp in the last assembly, this one has demonstrated and signaled, signpost itself by first rejecting that first proposal that came to it. It showed by that it will not. The second thing that will not make you rubber stamp is that for the first time in our history, in 63 years of our independence, this is the first time the president of Nigeria was a former senator and former governor. This is the first time the vice president of Nigeria was a former senator and a former governor. And this is the first time the Senate president is a former governor and a former senator, and a sitting senator, and a minister. So this exposure, this experience is intended and will be at play at every level of discussion. Mutual respect from both and from all. Incisive insights into issues before decisions are taken. And of course, you are going to find a total synergy in which both the parliament and the executive are going to come out as one of the best you can ever produce in the Nigerian political history. So the issue of being rubber stamp is not about agreeing. Don't forget, several attempts were made to amend the Nigerian Electoral Act and the Constitution. It was this so-called rubber stamp assembly of the 9th Senate that was able to make it possible for us to get the kind of quality of the reforms to the Electoral Act that we have, which today has given us a semblance of stability in spite of the hiccups. All we must do, and no constitution in any case, no law made by man can be infallible. Infallibility is a preserve of the gods. It is not a human attribute to be perfect. Not even the American Constitution, not even the English Constitution. I know no constitution that has not been. In fact, the largest amendment to any constitution on earth is the American Constitution. It has the largest amendment ever. To show you, in over 200 years of its existence as a democracy, America has the largest number of amendments to its constitution. So Nigeria has 63. How many times have we amended our constitution? So I do not see us getting it perfect, but I think we are moving gradually. With each round and each epoch and each level of elections, we are getting more and more amendments and more perfect, and more trying to get at perfection as much and eliminate as much of the pitfalls as possible. And in doing that, I am very certain that even our judiciary is getting to interpret the laws according to the times. Technology is coming in. The laws that govern manual elections are now beginning to change with digital elections. And of course, that also means that in the art of governance, in the art of governance, digitalization, budget timelines, benchmarks, and all that are going to be completely eliminated in a way that we are going to no longer have just an off-season and off-the-way electoral process, off-the-way governance process, budgeting process, the templates, medium-term programs for budgeting, loans. Don't forget that this government has already announced, President Bola Tinubu has just announced that there are no more loans, that he no longer wants loans, that we cannot continue with loans. And look at the fantastic speech at the United Nations that gave us the sense of Pan-Africanism for the first time in a long while, since after the 1975 Africa has come of age.
Before we go there, let's go back to the issue of constitutional amendment and even the amendment of the Electoral Act. Should that be what to expect from the Senate? Are we likely to see a second look at the Electoral Act 2022, given the experiences from the 2023 elections? Are we going to have, as a permanent feature, which it has been since 1999, constitutional amendment committees being set up again?
Let me tell you this. As long as issues arise about the governance system of our country, there must be need for, we should never be afraid of constitutional amendments, nor the Electoral Act amendment, until we are able to satisfy ourselves that what we have at hand can ameliorate, has reduced, not eliminate. The elimination of faults from a system or from a constitution or from a law made by man should not be expected. But we should expect that this present parliament should have the courage to do the amendment where it is necessary. And please, citizenship participation in governance is very key. And this is where the civil society organizations and civil rights organizations must have to be vigilant about it. They must bring proposals. I saw the women the other time, women groups, coming out to ask for 5 or so amendments. That is the kind of thing, engagement we need to have with our parliament.
All of which failed.
Yes, that does not mean they should stop. This parliament may have a different disposition to it. So when you stop because it failed at the last time, it means you are not ready to succeed. The same parliament, I've told you 75 have come in. Those 75 can change the equation and take 2 or 3 of them. The next parliament will take the next one. You don't expect to get the 5. You may not get the whole 5, but you may get even 1 this time. Next time you get the other. There must be consistency. There must be persistence. There must be perseverance in the pursuit of civil rights. Because look at how many years it took America to even allow blacks to vote in America. How many years did it take them? Did they stop? They did not until they got the rights. Those who fought for it never voted. But today, blacks are voting and being voted for and becoming presidents in America.
Now, Honorable, given the fragile state of the Nigerian economy today and the fact of what we know it costs us to do the last constitutional amendment, do you think that this time around we should rush into it again?
There is nothing like rush. This constitutional is not a turnkey technology. It is a gradual process, well thought out process. You bring a proposal, private members' bill, executive bills, whatever it is, and send it. It passes through committees. It is when the committees have looked at it and discovered that it is worth it, that it is even presented for amendment, that you can even set it up. You don't just come up and dream about it and shout about it as if you are doing. Even student unionism.
But that's what it has been in the past. That every Senate, every National Assembly sets up a Constitution Review Committee. It almost becomes, although it's supposed to be an ad hoc committee, but it has almost become a standing committee. Each session has set up a Constitution Review Committee.
It is in response. It is always a response to demands by the citizens, who they must respond to. Because there is no time, at one point, remember the 2014 Constitutional Conference, the recommendations, the WISE Committee on the electoral reforms, all those things came out on board. It needed just to go to Parliament for passage. There was no political will or courage to do so, and it failed. Then, remember, it is primarily most of that formed the foundation of the very giant steps we took in the last electoral reforms. So if you have any such thing, going into it is not about rushing into it. It's about well thought out plans by both. You as an individual can take an amendment of a law to a parliamentarian. All of us. That is why we have the House of Reps. That's why we have the Senate. You can take it to your House of Reps member or to your senator for an amendment and propose it. He takes it to the committee. He himself has his own legislative aids. All of them have. So it is not about rushing. It is about the exigencies of the time. It is about the demands of the people. and you cannot ignore them. People are agitating and telling you that you must amend this law. I just saw the National Institute for Public Relations, NIPR, demanding that the law must be implemented. That law has been there and quiet. 2 laws are discovered in Nigeria, and that's because we are not a reading people. The Electoral Act as it is today is a near perfect document that screws up everything that we do. Because people didn't read it, didn't study it, the judges are now interpreting it for them and reading it to them for the first time. I know that until people went to court, lawyers went to court, most of them had not taken time to read that. I can bet on my life that most of those lawyers never saw anything about the Electoral Act until they went to the tribunals, and therefore creating the impression that it was not properly crafted. So it is also with certain legislation that are in existence. Example, the public smoking, smoking in public places. That law has been, it was a decree by Babangida at the time. It was later on amended into an act in 1999, 2000. Today there's the NIPR, which even gives prison terms for people who are not practitioners to come and practice, like quackery in medicine and other places. Today you have that. So if you have laws that people don't even know about because they are not enforced, not because they are not enforceable, because nobody has challenged them, the courts are not waiting for people to come and to go and start landing people in jail. So I believe that until there are demands, if there are no demands, nobody's going, no National Assembly member will just, he can propose it. Once you don't propose a law for amendment or for enactment, an act, there is nobody that will come and say, ad hoc committee, go and work and do a constitutional amendment. There have been several demands as we speak. Several demands. We have just talked about the women's own. It's a subject matter. If they come up tomorrow and go demonstrating and wearing black into the National Assembly, the Assembly is bound democratically, legislatively, and constitutionally to respond to that request by the women to say, our 35% affirmation has not been met, and therefore we demand this. Therefore, get us this legislation. But that does not include the fact, as they tried to do here under the David Mark Senate presidency, in which they come to ask for same-sex marriages. Those kind of things are not the things that we should engage ourselves in. And I imagine that this Senate is too responsible under the leadership of Senator Godswill Akpabio and his colleagues, who are sufficiently schooled, sufficiently informed about the implications of legislation in our country. I expect them that as they come back now, the issue of security, especially the new surge in insecurity, the amelioration, especially the threat by NLC, which is about the reversal of the fuel price, and all this, all those things should be looked into as a legislative agenda in the next upcoming days. I expect to see that happen.
The Senate resumes tomorrow, and tomorrow is when the NLC, for instance, will be deciding whether or not to proceed with their indefinite strike. What do you think the Senate can do to avoid the impending strike?
It is to intervene, because it's an executive function. But, like you know, in intergovernmental relations, it's a marble cake. There is an unfolding and interlocking and a relationship. There is nothing clear-cut to say that you cannot take executive decisions. And there is nothing clear-cut in the executive that makes them not to give legislation, such as you have the executive orders. Those are legislations. So also, the National Assembly can summon anybody, which is a judicial function. So also, the judgments of court can become state policy and laws of the land. So there is no clear-cut division, no mutually exclusive role. When you say that there are 3 arms of government, they are not mutually exclusive, they are mutually inclusive. So in that kind of relationship, you are going to find the National Assembly tomorrow. For example, I won't be surprised if the Senate President and the Speaker of the House of Reps call them to a meeting and say, we are going to intervene, we want to talk with the executive and see what they can do about it. Definitely, I know the NLC before now have done such things. I saw ASU do the same thing with the House of Reps. And the last government did not quite conclude because it was too close to the end of the tenure. They couldn't do it. For instance, I see the laws establishing universities being violated when the governing councils of universities are dissolved at will. It is not part of the ASU agreement of 1992 that was renewed in 2009, which says that governing council, because of the autonomy of the universities, should not be tampered with when they are dissolution of board because they are tenured. They're like other standard positions. So when you find those errors, it is the duty of the National Assembly, which enacted those laws, to remind the executive that you cannot dissolve governing council of universities because, as we speak now, the vice chancellors and the universities are in trouble about increasing school fee and what to do and what not to do. Whereas if the governing council were now functional, they will be there. So all they need now, the SGF, the president of Nigeria, and the president of the Senate should get back and say, look, return the councils and let them complete their tenure so that the universities won't suffer, because already the students are demonstrating about increase in fees. That shouldn't have happened if the governing councils were in place. So I imagine that very soon and shortly, those issues, it's just a matter of a letter, because the letter that was written to suspend the university governing councils was in error. And in any case, it didn't even mention the governing council, but it was wrongly interpreted, and today the universities are suffering. The students will soon go. Thank God that they have not gone rioting. If it was in the days of old, they would have rioted. All because of these errors. The National Assembly has that duty. So by tomorrow, I expect that NLC and the National Assembly may be interfacing with a view to tampering with the issue of the strike or no strike.
Honorable, one issue we must look at before we go on the program today, which has to do with the reports and murmurings that were in the media during the recess by the National Assembly about a possible leadership change when the Senate resumes. There were speculative reports in the media about, banana peels coming back again to the National Assembly and specifically to the Senate.
Well, I think in the aftermath of the dazing blows that came from the presidential election petition court, some elements in the opposition imagine that they can distract the National Assembly with that kind of story, because I am aware that all those who contested, for the first time we had sharing of committee positions in which there is less rancor in the National Assembly, in which even opposition elements got committees that were traditionally meant for the leading party, the ruling party, the majority in the National Assembly. This is the first time we're seeing that. It's never happened. I mean, you can count how many committees. And of course, you are finding that even those who contested, people like former Governor Yari, Senator Yari, who was a leading contender, coming very closely to the Senate President and even offering, at least I have met, I have heard, and I have seen, I'm working close enough for me to know, enough for them to say, let's close rank and put the Senate where it ought to be. The Senate must be one, for Nigeria to be one, because we have enough external crisis than for us to come in here as a National Assembly. Both opposition and the ruling party insisting that the National Assembly is the stabilizing rod upon which this country will stand at a point like this. So the issue of the banana peel is a concoction, is a hallucinatory and illusionary attempt to distract the National Assembly. And I can assure you by tomorrow, you will hear it on the floor of the House. I can predict almost that the National Assembly, in response to that, may even move a vote of confidence on its leadership, given, for example, that even in the retreat, there were more opposition elements giving lectures on the synergy that the National Assembly requires to sustain the country. Like I said, almost all former presiding officers of the National Assembly, key national presiding officers, both in the House of Reps and in the Senate, were the lecturers and the keynote speakers in that retreat. What they did was to bring to bear their experiences. And I think that will be demonstrated on the floor by tomorrow and in the days to come. You're going to see a synchronized, iron cast, unshakable, indivisible National Assembly.
Are you so confident that when the Senate resumes tomorrow, that there won't be any issues of leadership crisis? And I ask that question because these speculative reports that I talk about, were they made up?
You are a journalist, you know what you call planted stories. Some of these stories were planted. In the mainstream media, it is becoming a topic here because it is on the social media. Now, the terror of social media is real. Donald Trump complained about it bitterly in the US. And today, they're almost legislating against it. But in Nigeria, when they attempted it, people said, no, it was gagging of the press. This president was known to have closed down the press in his time as a military. But today, you will agree with me that we are now quoting the social media as if it is a substantive story, and you know how to do your background checks. If any senator has any case to present about leadership change, you know the pattern. It is never hidden. It's not a coup. It is something that is openly discussed. First of all, there will be rancor. People are going to speak out and say, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, you are oppressing us. You are not allowing us to talk. It will be on the floor first. You will see that show up in the first, those are the first signals you get that there's problem on the floor of the house. But if it is coming at the background as whispers, as murmurs, it is nothing but some political hallucination.
All right, thank you so much, Honorable Cletus Obon. He's a former lawmaker in Nigeria and a scholar. Thank you for giving us your time this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, Emmanuel.
Well done. Thank you so much.
God
Honorable
bless
Cletus Obon, former lawmaker in Nigeria. That's our program for today. Thank you so much for investing your time with us. See you again when we bring you a fresh edition of People, Politics, and Power. Bye for now.